All right, good morning again. On behalf of the Florida Department of Health in Volusia County, welcome to our interactive session. You have joined the Stigma interactive discussion. We are on the behavioral health track, but I think anybody can join this. My name is Helena Gerard, and I will be the facilitator of this session. And I would like to welcome Tori Gintoli, who is the subject matter expert for this session. We will have your microphones muted until you're recognized to speak. If you'll please just raise your hand and we will give you permission to unmute. You may also submit your questions and comments in the chat, and I will read them aloud if you'd like. You're definitely invited and encouraged to turn on your cameras. We don't care what you look like. We just want you to be here. Thank you to the Path for Hope Summit partners, Advent Health, Community Coalition Alliance, One Voice for Volusia, SMA Healthcare, and the Volusia Recovery Alliance. I have several questions to promote the discussion, but we'll just follow the conversation where it takes us. We can get started right now. So regarding stigma, I know that that's been a big topic of conversation for a lot of people. But what are some examples? What are some examples regarding substance use that you've heard of that we may not have, or we may have? Anybody want to share some examples?
You know, I can start us off if that's okay. I'm glad to see so many people in this specific session for behavioral health providers. I first came on board at SMA almost 10 years ago. And as you guys may not know, SMA was the product of the merger of two companies, the ACT Corporation that handled just mental health disorders, and Stewart Marchman Centers that handled only substance use disorders. So when I arrived, it was about 2 years post-merger, towards the end of 2011. And it was interesting because we still had two completely separate cultures, despite the fact that we had merged. We had a culture over on our detox unit, and I'm going to be frank about this. And in no way am I throwing our company under the bus, but it's important to be transparent about where we've come from and where we've gone. There were two distinct cultures out here. The folks that worked on our crisis stabilization unit, who were formerly ACT employees, they would say things like, there's no way I'm working with those drunks over there. And the folks that were on the detox unit that were formerly SMC staff would say, I'm not working with those crazy people, right? So this is a company that's merged, but we had our silos. We were still very siloed, and there was so much stigma in both directions. And we had to create a culture here of, listen, we work with people. We're going to maintain respect and dignity for folks, regardless of the illness. These are all illnesses, but it took time to change that. It took time to make that shift, a good amount of time, and not everybody was able to make the shift. And I think it's important that we recognize that as behavioral health providers, we are not immune from perpetuating stigma. It's baked into us to some degree, depending on how we grew up, how we were educated, what we learned, both throughout the course of our education and from our family of origin. I grew up in a household that was very much about personal responsibility. So I have to actively fight against my own, bias that people have more of a choice when it comes to substance use. I can admit that I have to work on that a lot. I have an easier time rationalizing or dismissing aggressive behavior from an individual who's here getting services on our CSU than I do from an individual on detox. And I have to keep myself aware of that, keep it at the forefront of my thoughts so I can actively work to fight against my own internalized biases. I think it's so important that we can't think that we're immune just because we're professionals. I'll zip my lip now. I could talk the whole hour, so I don't want to do that. I mean, what do you guys think about that?
I absolutely agree with that. That was exactly how I grew up. It was personal. It was a weakness. if you will.
Yeah,
And
character flaw. A
yeah,
choice and a character flaw and a weakness, and probably something to do with the parenting style. It was all that malarkey that we know to not be true. These are diseases, but we're taught that as kids. I was taught that as kids. I grew up with the Nancy Reagan, just say no, and the frying pan with the egg. This is your brain on drugs, right? So these are all things that it was repeated so often by everybody around us, and it's hard to get that out of your system, so to speak.
it is. And the culture, I think I'm so glad that you said that it takes time. I think, and I've heard others who are impacting their culture with, interview questions and things like that. Like, let's start from the very beginning. But yes. Oh, Karen has her hand up. How do I?
I got you unmuted me.
Okay.
It's always good to hear you share. So I agree 100%. In our peer cafe that we host at the VRA every month, part of the session is typically exploring biases, right? Because we know that we all have them. It's just a question of degree. And coming from, the place that I come in, my 12-step recovery, I had to work really hard to let go of some of my deep belief system about there's only one way to recover, right? Because I had a sponsor that was very strict about, I'll only sponsor people in that particular fellowship, right? And so I had to evolve past that and deal with my own guilt almost at times for leaving my strict, narrow lane, so to speak, and so I think it's something that we all need to increase our awareness about, that we all have biases and prejudice. It's a matter of degree of how much we're willing to surrender to it, to grow past it. I think it's an important dialogue to keep having. As you know, I do a lot of stigma training. And so I think the continuation of education is really important in this realm, because as we know, stigma kills. And I never want to be the person that pushed somebody out of their recovery path, by mistake, by my attitude, by my ignorance, right? Because I don't have all the answers. I think it's important to instill in staff that it's okay to remain teachable and that it's a good thing, but thank you for this very much. And you know how I love you, Tori. Thanks.
Well, very well said, Karen. We need to keep this at the forefront, and we can never delude ourselves to think, oh, we've solved the problem or we've fixed the culture. It still continues to sneak back in, and it has to constantly be monitored. And you have to constantly work with the staff, and then you got compassion fatigue. The fellow yesterday, I lost his name for a moment there, but what a wonderful story he had to tell about compassion fatigue and how toxic it can become to individuals. We have to keep a bead on our staff and how they're doing, and actively engage them and confront this stuff head on if we're going to work to a high standard and have exceptional healthcare for our clients. There's no way around it. We can't ignore it, and we can't think we've fixed it.
No. Whitney, I see your hand.
Yeah, so I really relate to what you were saying, Karen, and I'm also a person in long-term recovery and been in the industry for a very long time. And I kind of cringe at the things I've said in the past and done in the past because I was ignorant completely. And I'm really glad now that there's so many places to find the best information, and so now today I get to be open-minded and practice those principles that I learned in recovery, that a lot of times people, I don't find they do practice in terms of when it goes against their program. So like, if it's not, you know, Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous or whatever anonymous, then it's wrong. And a long time ago, an instructor had challenged me, and he was like, well, if you're going to be in therapy, how are you going to help people? And so I was like, well, the 12 steps, you know. And he was like, but what if they don't want to do that? And I was like, well, they need to do that because that's the way. And like, he was like, okay, well, then you're not going to help a lot of people. And I was just so, oh my God, you know, how dare you? And so it just was like this little light bulb that went on, like, oh, wait, you know, not everybody can recover the same way. But it didn't really hit until way more recently that there really are these other paths to recovery. And like the whole idea of harm reduction was just really foreign to me. And so I've been really happy to dig into that. And also, like you said, to look at my own biases and my own issues with stigma. Like when people were like, say you're a person in long-term recovery, I'm like, but I'm proud to be an addict. Like I'm like, I wear it like a badge of honor. It's totally fine with me if people call me that. You know, I feel like it breaks the stigma, and that's not really the truth, but that's how it felt. And so I fought for it, you know? And so I'm really happy to be learning and to be in this session today to hear from others and just learn, you know, that's what we're here to do, is learn and be open-minded. That's like the whole idea. So I'm really grateful that we did this like open session where everybody can talk and whatnot. So thanks.
That gave me goosebumps when you said that you cringe when you think about the things, because I absolutely do the same thing. Like, and I even caught myself a couple times during the summit, listening to things, and I was like, we can't do that. And then I was like, but it's working. It's working. Like, yes, we can do that. And it was, you know, I just, that honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness, it's, you know, that's, I just, yeah, I mean, even yesterday, today, probably I will do that. Like, wait, hold on, it is possible. So I'm glad that you said that, because I can definitely relate. So I have another question that I think I'm excited to hear the answer. But so we talked about different kinds of stigma and our personal experience. So we definitely have observed it and experienced it. And but when you do that, like, how do you respond? How do we change that?
Well, I think really calling it out is the only way. I think you have to call it out. You have to call it what it is.
Yeah.
You know, you can't accept it. You can't just say, oh, well, my staff are burned out. You have to go far deeper than that. You have to talk to them about what's going on. You have to remind them that these are illnesses. You have to actively engage. And you have to be able to stand up and say, no, you know, please don't use that word, or use this term instead. It has to be done actively.
And that's not always easy. It's definitely
Yeah, it can be challenging. It can be tiring. It can be frustrating, but it needs to be done. It's got to be direct. And, you know, not just at work. And this is a forum for, you know, behavioral health professionals, but, you know, in my peer group as well. You know, there's a Tory that doesn't wear a tie, and the folks that he hangs out with, you know, they've got strong opinions about things, and I need to be able to speak up to my buddies too. So.
I agree. I even I think about my daughter too, different things. You know, there's a lot of questions and different, you know, different things that she's exposed to, and it's being able to answer them honestly and without without putting my bias that I am trying to fight into her as well. You know, it's definitely, it's everywhere. And I definitely, I'll hear things walking down the hallway or somebody walking past my door and I'm like, you can't say that. We can't. And we have to say something, because if we don't, then it just continues. Karen.
So, you know, the word abuse, people are always saying substance abuse, and it just grates on my nerves, right? Because I'm like, I want to yell at people, like, don't say that. But I have a responsibility to continue educating people that, you know, that's a word we're trying to move away from, whether it's, you know, someone that I've asked to do a training on our behalf, and then all of a sudden they're using the word abuse all over the place, and I want to go, ah, you know, but just the constant reminder that, you know, our language does matter, and that, you know, you wouldn't say a diabetic is abusing sugar, right? So it's the same thing. And I often use that example because it's like, okay, you know, like we have to move away from that word in order to help reduce the stigma of drug use, because it's so detrimental. But you know, like it starts with the feds, right? They're still the Substance Abuse Mental Health Association or whatever, you know, whatever SAMHSA stands for. I always forget, but you know, the word abuse is still in our federal government, right? So then it allows people to continue to use that word. And I know for myself as a person in recovery, I don't want to be called an abuser. It has such a negative connotation. So I just feel like I have the responsibility to have the courage to say, you know, this language needs to change. And I'll share a quick experience. I was on a meeting with a whole bunch of people, very high level people. And I had done trainings at Career Source. And one of the people that kept using the word abuse, you know, over and over again. And Robin King corrected them because she was in one of my trainings, right? And I wanted to like yell from the rooftops, yay, somebody listened, you know, like I was so thrilled that the CEO of Career Source gets it, right? And that she's willing to say we shouldn't use the word abuse. And it just, so, you know, like it's like throwing a pebble in the pond, you know, like one change can lead to another change, can lead to another change. And that's how things get different, you know, like my friend Phil says, transform people. And so the more that we do this kind of work, the better society is going to be at accepting that this is a brain disease. So thank you.
I'm glad that you use that example of abuse, because I think that's one of the ones that I struggle with. I don't say it, but I'm like, but in my negative self-talk, I'll say it about myself. And I think that's one of the things in recovery that has taken me until today, all the time, to not, you know, to say, but I did, you know, I did these bad things. And so it's really to say, no, it wasn't, like to be able to change that conversation in my own head, because if I'm going to be like, give that compassion to others, then why wouldn't I give it to I can't give it out to others if I'm not giving it to myself, kind of thing. So I think I'm just glad that you said that, because I think I actually said, but I abused drugs. Yes. I think it was yesterday that I said it, that I did abuse them, but you know what? I used them. And so I'm just glad that you said that, because that kind of made a light go off in my I don't know, it changed my perspective. So thank you for saying that. And Nancy.
Hi, good morning, everybody. You know what? I love this conversation because we're talking about, at the root of all of this is having compassion for others. And I'm thinking about in the counseling profession, to talk about whatever is the popular modality to use for the day in terms of treatment. And but what it oftentimes comes back to is just the most simple things of developing rapport with somebody. Carl Rogers talks about that unconditional regard. It isn't some fancy, way to do treatment. It's simply connecting and listening with a person and treating them with respect. I remember really early on when I was in my internship, I had this really wise mentor, and she talked about outcomes for counselors and how oftentimes it's the interns that have better outcomes. They're able to reach people because they're more able to not kind of get caught up in all of the, I don't know, fancy modalities, but really just be able to relate to people more directly and not have some of that ego get in the way. And I remember her saying, 96% of being a counselor is personality. It's not whatever modality you're using. And I really come back to that because that, I think it was Dr. Palm talks about the language of the heart, about how powerful that is. So sometimes it's really, just the simple things that help us connect with others and help, break down the stigma and make a difference. Thanks.
I agree wholeheartedly. Nothing is stronger than love. It's the bottom line.
Absolutely. And Whitney did write in the chat that she had to have things explained to her. I agree. I think that was kind of what just happened with Karen when she was explaining it. I was like, oh yeah. Thank you for that. The best medicine of all is love and compassion. Yes. Absolutely. So thinking about the summit and the things that we've heard over the last couple of days, is there anything that you will do differently? Do you think anything changed for you regarding stigma?
I just can't wait to get my hands on the materials to share with my staff. There have been so many amazing presentations that have touched on this subject. And, I think it's great to have conversations like this one because it puts it back at the forefront of my mind and it goes to the top of my to-do list. We can get so bogged down in all the little ticky-tack things that we have to get done, all the muckety-muck obligations. It's easy to get distracted from that. So, these types of summits are just essential to keep the conversation going and to keep this at the forefront of our minds. My intent is to share the materials from this with my clinical team, the techs, everybody, as much as we can. We're so busy on the floor. Everyone right now is struggling with, staffing that not a lot of folks from this center have been able to attend because they're working with the clients directly. You've even got my directors out on the floor working. So for me, this is really a reminder to continue the conversation, and it's been a wonderful resource for tools to do so. I'd like to hear more from the folks that have joined us today. What do you guys think? I see a couple of SMAers out there. Do I have to call on people? Because I will. Lisa's putting her hand up, it looks like.
Yes.
I think she needs to be unmuted. There you go. Hi,
Can
Lisa.
you hear me? Hi, I'm sorry, I'm having some technology problems. I was trying to like find the chat so I could tell everyone that I was not able to find it. I can't actually see anyone anymore. I don't know what's happened. I thought I got disconnected, but I guess I'm still here because I'm unmuted now. But I think everybody has had great insight. I think that this has been a great conversation. I agree with a lot of things that were said. I think a lot of us were brought up to think of some of these things as more of a moral issue, both in terms of certainly substance abuse, but also mental health culturally for a lot of people. And it's something that we definitely need to work towards, minimizing as much as possible, being aware of our own biases, because the reality is that we do all have them. And we can only keep them in check as much as we're aware of them. So I think, this conversation and conversations like these are great and really need to be had.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lisa.
I think it's really hard for people to be honest too. Like, I think that, like, I know for myself, and I'll speak for me, like my ego got in the way, like to have a genuine, real conversation about things. And so what that led to was my humiliation. That's what happens. Like, so I spoke up in a meeting, and this was 6-7 years ago, but it was like, oh, okay, I got put in my place, and rightfully so, and if we don't want that to happen to us, it's a good idea to like really be honest about what we're thinking, because I think that I'm kind of grateful I spoke up, because it made me like realize like, oh, wow, I do have stigma. I do have these thoughts that are not correct. I do have, these beliefs that probably need some adjustment, but if I wouldn't have spoken up, I would have just continued on and not really been open to the ideas that I am today. It's a journey. And I think that we say that all the time for our clients, right? Like, it's a journey, not a destination. And then for ourselves, we're like, we're supposed to know it all. Like, that's how I feel. And then I'm like, oh, wait, it's a journey for me too, So, I mean, I feel like that's this conference, when you're asking about it, I'm like, what this conference will be for me is 3 weeks from now, something will happen. And I'll be like, oh, they were talking about this in that conference. So even though I can't think of anything right this second, I know that in the weeks to come, the months to come, it'll pop in, just like what my teachers taught me 15, 20 years ago. So I'm really enjoying it, and it's been really good and well put together. So I appreciate that. But I just want to mention that, because it's hard for us to be humble to like speak about our true thoughts when we know that, we might not even know that it's not right. I'll use the right, right.
Absolutely. Christina says, as someone in recovery, I see a lot of people dealing with stigma within the recovery community and in the field. I think it's definitely going to be a process to get rid of the stigma. I love that people are talking about this, because it's the only way to change it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. How many folks in here are leaders or directors or supervisors of some sort in the behavioral health field? Could you guys maybe raise your hands? Kind of get a count of, who the leaders are. Cool. And for the folks that have their cameras off and are muted, can you still raise your little virtual hand? Let's put that little virtual hand up.
Do you want to try to add a quick poll, Tori?
I could try, but I would not.
I can do it. I can do it.
Thank you.
You're so good, Kasia.
My 14-year-old son does all of the tech stuff for us now. I was an Apple IIe guy. That probably dates me pretty bad, but that's where I'm at. So I said it. Okay, so I think we've heard from a lot of the leaders already. So the folks that are your frontline staff, I'd like to hear from them. How do you guys confront this? What do you do in your daily work? Oh, very cool. Okay, boop, I can answer that. 4 out of 4. 3. This is nifty. Okay, cool. So the majority of folks in here are frontline staff. So I'd like to hear from the frontline staff. How do you guys address this? How do you confront it, either with your peers or with your clients? Any takers? I can talk about it from a leadership perspective. I chose the admin route a long time ago when I got to that fork in the road between clinician and admin. And I know that it's a different perspective when you're working one-on-one. So would love to hear from the folks who are, face-to-face practitioners. What do you guys think?
Oh, Nancy has her hand up.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, when I was, I've done both sides of things, been in direct service and then worked in administration. And when I was in school 20 years ago, and I don't know if it's changed, but there were 2 different tracks. You either had the mental health track or you had the substance use disorder track, or what was called substance abuse back then. And you did one or the other. So there is this great divide just within the mental health community that, well, I don't do that stuff. So I was on the mental health side of things. I think I had one class on substance use disorders, and so had very minimal exposure to it, really kind of no fault of my own. So when I was sort of plopped down in this community mental health center, seeing a mix of everybody dealing with all sorts of things, I didn't know what I didn't know. And thinking back, I had some of those cringe moments where I really lost opportunities to even have a conversation or assess somebody about what was really going on with them in terms of their drug and alcohol use. And looking back, I'm like, oh my gosh, So hopefully that's getting a little bit better. It seems like that, at least from what I'm seeing, there's not quite so much of a divide. There's much more that's talked about with co-occurring disorders, and there's much more knowledge of clinicians coming in. But I really think that that divide contributed to stigma and the own field, and within the own field of kind of, that's not what I deal with, and that's something else. So I don't know if anybody has any thoughts about that as well, or see how that affects the work that they do on the front lines. Thank you.
Looks like we have a comment in the chat from Stephanie. I work for a drug prevention coalition. We don't work with clients, but definitely experience these issues in regular community work. I also have work to do on myself to address historical stigma, but I feel like I have come a very long way because of our great relationships with SU treatment providers in our community and throughout the state. Thank you for sharing that, Stephanie. Absolutely. And Nancy, I totally agree with you. That bifurcation of these illnesses that occurred a long time ago, humans, the human animal, we're all about categorizing everything, and putting everything in little boxes. We do it really well. And sometimes we do it to a degree where it's actually detrimental to our own ability to understand things. And I think that our culture, our Western culture especially suffered from this division between the substance use disorders and mental health. And it speaks exactly to what we were up against when at post-merger here at SMA. We had 2 very distinct boxes, and never the 2 shall meet. And staff did not want to climb out of their box and go anywhere near the other box. So I think you make a very, very valid point. Absolutely.
that putting things in pretty boxes, it makes me think of something I heard last night. We were just talking about when someone is entering into recovery, they're brand new, and nobody says hi, nobody greets them. It's life and death, you know, by saying, hi, what's your name? Hi, my name's Helena. We're so glad you're here. You know, we don't, I think waiting for somebody else to do that, you know, that, what the bystander effect, you know, wait, somebody else will say hi, somebody else will introduce themselves, somebody else will say, we're so glad you're here. But, you know, like putting on, you know, might be really tired, might have had a long summit, might have, you know, but let's just say, hey, you know, like that might not be my role in that, you know, I catch myself walking through the lobby. My role is, you know, not typically to walk through the waiting room and say hi to everybody sitting in there. But there's been a couple times where I've seen somebody outside and said hi, and just, you know, hi, what's your name? Or hi, I'm so glad you're here. I think those are super, super important things that they don't fit in boxes, but it's just being a human and saying kind things. So I'm really glad that you said that, because it's easy. It's easy some days, and some days it's just like, I just want to put my head down, go straight to where I'm going, or leave where I am, or whatever the case is. But, you know, it's, when it comes to substance use, it's life and death. It's not, it's not a simple, anything else. So, Whitney.
I can't help it. I get excited. You reminded me of when I used to walk through my lobby at my old place of work. And, you know, I haven't been client facing for a long time, but, you know, seeing somebody, and you know, it's a new admission because of their appearance and how they're, you know, how they're sitting there staring at the floor, and super, like, you could see, it's like you can physically see the shame right there for everybody to see in the lobby. Like, and so they have all their stuff there, you know, it's in a big pile. And I'd be like, hi, how are you? You know, I don't always ask how you are, but I'll say, you know, and then they'll say, not too good. And I'll go, I know, honey, you're in the right place. And they'll go like, thank you, and start crying, you know, just by saying hi and kind of reassuring them that it's going to be okay. I mean, just that little bit. Sometimes I wasn't their clinician. I didn't have to do a group with them, or, you know, like sometimes it's some of our, like, just taking a step out of what our everyday is and making that effort. And also, like, I really kept saying to the admin, like, can we put their stuff somewhere so they're not sitting in the lobby with their worldly possessions sitting there? And like, that's embarrassing. Like, I wouldn't want to do that. I would be so embarrassed. You know, I don't think you have to be having a substance use disorder to be embarrassed by that, you know. It's yeah, that's not fun. So it's sometimes also realizing, like, they're like, yeah, but we don't have anywhere to put it, and they're lucky to be here. And I'll be like, whoa, hey, you know, like, did you just say that? Like, let's roll that back for a minute. Like, I'm not your supervisor, but this person deserves dignity, you know, that's what this is about. It's about dignity. They're a human being, you know. And like what you were talking about, Tori, it's like we get in that every day of go, 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 go. I have 3 more admissions today, and if I don't do this right now, you know, some of that I think is stigma too, because you're so caught up in your job that you're losing sight that it's a human being that you're dealing with. And on top of it, it's somebody that is an addict, and in the negative way, that kind of impacts how you treat them. And I've seen that happen. And I was always wondering, like, why do you work here? What's your motivation for working here if that's kind of where you're at with how you treat people, you know? I think in general, people don't do that, but there's always those instances where we lose sight of, like, the dignity piece for somebody, you know. Well, they're lucky to be here. They were under a bridge two days ago, and, you know, now they've got, you know, whatever, 3 hots and a cot, right? Like that's how people like, oh, you should be lucky. And it's like, you should feel like, I don't feel lucky to be treated that way. I don't care if there's a roof over my head or not. I'd rather be under the bridge because at least I know what I'm going to get there. When I came to you, I trusted you, I let my guard down, and then you treated me like that. That's how I think our clients look at it when it happens, And I think that's just true in general in life. Like you never know who you're looking at or talking to. You don't know what they're going through. And I think in general, we could apply these principles to all of our affairs, right? Like to everything that we do, because it doesn't have to just be at work or with the substance use population. I think especially I think through COVID, we realized we all need that compassion. We all need that understanding. We all need that smiling face. It has been a tough road. So maybe that will help all of us have some more perspective on what our clients do go through and how they are experiencing life sometimes. So you made me think of that, Elena.
I think spot on, Whitney. You touched on a couple of the really important things that we kind of overlook. They kind of fade out of our perspective. And one of those is the environment of care. You walk down the same hallway a million times over the course of a year, and you start to tune out how grungy things can end up looking, how dated things can look. One of the struggles that we're facing here at the Chet Bell Crisis Center is the environment of care. We've got this concrete block everywhere. It's not healthcare, it's incarceration. It's disgusting. It's horrible looking. So as fast as we can, we're trying to cover this stuff up with a layer of knockdown to make it look appealing. But when I first got out here, it wasn't considered that big of a deal. And exactly for reasons like you're saying, staff were like, oh, well, they're sleeping in the woods anyways. They're not going to care if, it's the tile is worn down or the walls are concrete block. At least they have a roof over their head. Well, it's not very, dignified to roll over and see concrete blocks looking back at you, staring back at you. So we're constantly renovating and we're constantly scrounging up the money that we can to change the environment of care, because you do, as human beings, as animals, we start to tune this stuff out. You start to tune it out. The other big thing that you touched on was the impact of COVID. And I'd love to hear the group's thoughts on this. To me, it feels like this pandemic that doesn't want to seem to end has really just reduced everybody's threshold for, frustration tolerance. And I've got, my emotional cup is so full, it's overflowing. And now I've got less room than ever before for anybody else's, pain and suffering. And I'm sorry, but I can't hold that. And my compassion for others has been reduced because of this constant just pressure that this pandemic is putting on everybody. And what are you guys feeling that too? It's like everybody's on edge. Everywhere you go is what it feels like. And there's no room for any, everybody's so busy worried about themselves and caring about what's going on in their own little world. It's like overall, we've got less room to help others is what it almost feels like. It's horrible.
Karen, I see you raising your real hand.
So definitely COVID has had a huge impact, even to the point of, in my trainings that I do for first responders and Stigma, I made the point yesterday or on Tuesday that, COVID has increased the impact of stigma because a lot of people are afraid of getting COVID from somebody that may have overdosed, and more people are walking away from somebody that may have experienced, an overdose and not been willing to administer Narcan. And then the issue of more and more stress on available resources in hospitals lend itself to, picking and choosing who's going to get treatment. It's going on in other states. I haven't heard too much of that happening in Florida yet, but I do know that as a former healthcare professional and the fear factor of dealing with COVID coupled with overdoses and substance use disorder and all of that can have a very negative impact in people getting help. And so, and to your point, Corey, I can remember when I worked for Daryl Strawberry, and, the CEO walked into the building that we were buying and saw all the block walls. He was like, this has to go, like it's not conducive to a peaceful environment or a healing environment, right? So, it's important to consider that when you're building out your office space, that is this a welcoming space? Is this a healing space? It's so important. But to your point of COVID, it has impacted so many things, the availability of meetings, the divisiveness of vaccine versus no vaccine. There's been collateral damage, and it's very unfortunate. But I think the more that we can treat people with compassion, that really goes a long way. So thank you.
I very rarely watch the news, but last night I wanted to see William Shatner go into space. And they were talking about toys and the shortage of toys and Christmas, and the shelves are empty, and showing all, and I was like, isn't this the toilet paper thing all over again? People are, but it's Christmas presents. So I'm thinking, and I'm like, okay, well, so maybe this year we're going to make a bunch of Christmas presents, and that's going to be awesome. But I immediately panicked. I was like, oh my gosh, I have to get all my Christmas shopping done right now. How can I? I feel like that is one thing that COVID has definitely done, is that, oh my gosh, we're out of toilet paper, and we're not going to have toilet paper ever again. So, and now it's just, I just wanted to share that, because you're absolutely right. It has created an unedginess, but I see Regina's hand up. So.
Good morning. You can hear me? Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So I've been sitting here trying to gather my thoughts, thinking of what I wanted to say. So first off, summer was great. I think very informative. And you talk about stigma and everything. So, and biases, and I think that was very, very hard for me to overcome, because I am visually impaired. I was born this way. So I've had to deal with disability all my life. And so being able to overcome different things, yeah, it's kind of hard to, well, why can't you overcome a drug addiction, or makes you start using? Because it really has not been in my life. I'm over 50, and I've only known possibly 2 people who may have used drugs, and that's it. So until we got the OD2A grant and then the IOPSO grant, I really was not in any way part of the recovery community or knew anything about it. And then being a data analyst, so it was all numbers for me. So there wasn't the human aspect of that, which is one reason why I wanted to get with VRA on International Awareness Day, which is great. If you haven't ever been, you really need to go. It is absolutely wonderful, very informative, and then when Helena came on board and sharing everything with her, it just put such a human face on everything. And so my thing now is, what can I do to help? What should I be doing? Because it's something that involves all of us, so even though I may not be personally affected, as a community, I am affected. I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Regina.
And I have to say that Regina has been one of the most open-minded people to work with. Every time she shares that she hasn't been, that it's not been her, it's I wish everyone was, had that, I want to learn more, teach me. I think that's been mentioned a couple of times, the teachable, staying teachable. So, gosh, I think that was there any presentation specifically that you wanted to mention that brought up stigma that we wanted to discuss? I love where this conversation is going, though. I don't want to really, if anybody wants to raise their hand or turn on the camera, or anybody with the camera on.
I feel so bad that I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he was the paramedic and then the nurse who talked about just the stigma within the professional community and how he had to fight it both internally and occupationally, and how pervasive it was. And I'm so sorry. Thank you, Mark Rowley. Thank you so much. I appreciate that, Whitney. That was a phenomenal presentation. Just the transparency, the honesty, just unafraid to look all of that, right in the eye, both within himself and around him. Incredibly moving story. And that's the top of my list to share with my staff because of how powerful it is and because it speaks directly to all of us who work in the field. It's a reminder that we're not immune to this, that we have to address it head on, that it's going to persist, that it's a journey, that it's not, something you can ever really cross off the list. That's never going to happen. We're never going to be done with this. And to think otherwise is foolhardy. Really, his presentation was just phenomenal.
I can't wait to watch that one. I'm so glad everything's recorded.
Yeah.
Whitney.
I wanted to say the same thing. I loved his presentation. And when you were asking the question about presentations, the thing that came up to me was like, how do we start addressing the stigma that's in the healthcare industry, specifically in the emergency department? Because talk about compassion fatigue. I mean, and it's like, I kind of feel it's like to no fault of their own. I mean, in fairness to them, they are literally seeing the same people over and over and over and over again. And they're combative and they're angry and they're not, I mean, look, we're hard to deal with on a regular day, much less on the day we just got Narcan. So I get it. Like intellectually, I totally get it. But it's like, I just wish they saw, having our peers in there. I feel like our peers are fighting two battles. Like, I feel like our peers are in there and they're like trying to like help the people that they're working right next to and hearing. I mean, they're like getting traumatized, I think, a little bit because they're hearing these professionals say some pretty derogatory things, not really understanding what peer is. That you just basically said that about me because I was that person 2 or 3 years ago or whatever it was. So I was just thinking about that. Like, I want to be impactful in that way. I'm in the hospitals a lot, so I don't really, I mean, I know education and power of example and stuff like that, but there's just something I was thinking about as we were talking today is like the healthcare, especially in the hospital. I think that's the area that's hard. I don't know what you guys think, but.
I agree completely. I've got friends who are nurses, respiratory therapists, even doctors, APRNs, and no one's immune to this. And I think that a lot folks are going to be accessing those emergency levels of care far more often and almost always before they get to us as providers of treatment, right? That really is the front line, as is public safety, law enforcement, EMTs, and people are in such horrible crisis when they see them, and we're only human. You know, how do we combat that? We have the luxury of this type of a forum, and it's part of our agenda. That's driven by our accreditation. That's driven by mandates from the state, if you will. That's the muckety muck in me talking, but we have this on our checklist of things that we have to do, even though we know it's more than just a checklist item. Is this even on the checklist for the providers of these services? I don't know. I think that it underscores the need for crisis intervention team training. That is such an important thing when it comes to changing the way that our first responders see individuals who have substance use disorders. That's huge. The CIT is so important. And this needs to also be something that hospital administrators, medical surgical hospital administrators put on their agenda. I've spoken to individuals high up in the ranks. I will not mention the name of the hospitals, but one of the people involved kept referring to an individual with a alcohol use disorder as inebriates. I was like, what year is this, man? What is it, like 1930 all of a sudden? It's far more of a struggle, I think, with the first responders, with the hospitals, because of the intensity, and because I don't know that they really have an onus to put their focus on it. Nancy has her hand up.
Yeah, hi, Whitney. Great point about the hospital. I've talked to a lot of the people that are doing that hospital bridge work over the northeastern Florida, because I've heard those stories as well. And again, it's certainly not blaming anybody. It's a very frustrating situation, but I wanted to kind of get at, when you've been able to find these positive environments where there's that lack of stigma and people are supportive, how do you do that so we can share those lessons learned with other hospitals? And the advice that I was given is oftentimes it's really helpful for a peer to talk to a peer. So if you have an advocate that's a doctor that can talk to a fellow doctor or nurse or whatever, that sometimes they're able to have more of an influence in that way. When I was also told where there were hospitals where there are a lot of contracted doctors, so there's new people coming in all the time, they're not able to sustain that culture. So what do you do then? And the response I got back about that was, when they had staff, especially peers that were embedded at the hospital, that were there regularly, that were part of staff and were part of trainings, that they had really just created the culture at the hospital of, well, this is how we do things. So when somebody new came in that was already established, that, get on board, because if you're not, the train's leaving without you. And that really helps set the tone for a positive environment around people in recovery. So I wanted to offer that as well. And to the other point about a lot of this can also occur in law enforcement and those types of environments. I received the same advice, and I'm sorry I can't credit who had told me that, but they've talked about when you have other champions that are even working in the same county that can talk to their peers, another police officer or sheriff, whatever, and say, hey, this is my experience with this, that they were able to get through with that. And oftentimes, even if it's somebody in the same county versus another county, because people, kind of can get sort of territorial about, well, that's your area, it's working for you up there, but that's not working for me here, that they've been able to, collaborate better in that way. Great point. Thanks.
Thank you. This has been such a great conversation, and I have a whole page of notes of things, I think, trainings and conversations that I think can be our next steps. I feel so inspired, and I'm so grateful for this conversation. I wanted to be in person, and since we can't, I think this is the next best thing. So I'm so grateful. It's already 11:15, so it is already time to go to our next session. Thank you so much, Tori, for being our subject matter expert and keeping the conversation. Thank you, everybody, for participating. It's what I dreamed it could be, and I'm so happy. Like, I'm really, really grateful. Please use your link in the chat to complete the evaluation survey for this session. And thank you to Florida State University again for managing the evaluations. Thank you all for participating in this and making it a really meaningful discussion. Please go to your summit program in the PDF, or go to pathforhope.com/summit2021 and click on the link for the next session you'd like to attend. And I'm sure I will see some of you over there. Get some wiggles out in the next 5 minutes. Thank you all so much. This is so meaningful.
Thanks, Elena. And let's keep the conversation going, everybody. Let's keep it going. Thank you so much.